The Ceylon Tamils, when they migrated, came with all their age-old customs, traditions and heritage from Jaffna. Sinna Yalpanams sprouted in areas like Katong and Kampong Baru.
So my father took widow, Changi, Sikla. She don't like it. At last she got a huge check. No muddy, no sandy, no on the Tota Chiringi and the Mulu Kalautra, nothing in the check. So she said, okay, you buy this. How much? $50. 2-acre land, $50. My father immediately bought it and staying in an atap house in a clay, no cement. Clay house everywhere. Very rich people also say, very poor people also the same.
It is to be noted that Ceylon Tamils were mostly Hindus and never compromised in their practices.
Singing and music instruments and all that was okay, but anything to do with the actual physical form of standing up on stage and dancing was really looked down upon. And it was considered to be the lowest of low art forms, and that was simply because of the thinking of the people, and also partly the missionaries who did this. So when some of these people who came away from Jaffna, from Ceylon, or then Ceylon, so they came with the idea that was there prevalent at that time. And so it was not allowed for daughters of good families to be seen prancing on the stage. There was this family, Mrs. Raja. I mean, the whole family, but they didn't actually belong to any institution or any school, because they was quite complete in themselves. Because the mother played the Jalatarangam, and the one daughter played the flute, and the second one she played the tabla, and the third one she played the violin. And she also danced, but it was a different type of semi-classical dances. So that family contributed quite a lot to the art scene. And they were grouped together with one person who really should get a lot of mention, and that is Dr. Chota Singh. As a doctor by profession, but he would just put on a show for the sake of putting on a show.
And Mrs. Jayalakshmi Thanabalasingham states,
that's how she started Carnatic music at a very young age. By 5-6 years, she was already into music, Carnatic. I took on flute with Dr. Chota Singh's encouragement. I took on flute to play this way, the flute. So I used to play the flute for the orchestra. Originally, I played the harmonium. Later on, I took on the flute, and I played the flute. I was the only one playing the flute. So we were a family of musicians. Mother played the Jalatarangam, my sister played the oboe, I played the flute, and the younger sister played the violin. We, in ourselves, we were one little orchestra. Anyway, we had this ladies' orchestra which started in 1940, just ladies, the veena, the guitar. At that time, we had somebody playing the Bulbul Tara, one Mrs. Devaraj, and they're all very ancient instruments, violin, tabla, of course, my sister.
The culture importance does not start outside, it starts in the house, around the parents. The parents are the important people to give the child an environment where the language and culture are imparted.
Mr. Narasingham was responsible in starting the Music and Dance Academy at the Sri Shenbaka Vinayagar Temple. It is one of the 7 pillars of the temple. The cultural activities of the temple moved in leaps and bounds to showcase superb programs for National Day and New Year and many other functions and cultural activities that were held there. The Theisavalamel law that was unique to the Ceylon Tamil was brought with them. They also brought with them their own laundryman, barber, carpenter, and most important, the goldsmith that made the thali. According to it, Samandam or marriage is forbidden between close relations except cross cousins, namely children of a brother with children of a sister. The Hindu rite of Homam, the fire ceremony, may be dropped, but the tying of the thali is essential to the validity of the marriage. A wedding sari called a kure or pudavai is also given to the bride. If the parties cannot afford the services of a priest, the vannan or the laundryman and the ambatan or the barber should be present. It is interesting to observe that many Christians from Ceylon, despite that they had chosen to be away from Hinduism, still continue to use the oil lamps, the kalash, many die-hard customs that were a part of Hindu rites and practices, including the thali as a symbol of marriage for their weddings. There is a strong stand that this is exclusive to the Tamil converts in Ceylon in particular. The marriages were brought with the traditional proposals, and arranged marriages was the way. That practice still continues today, even though there are few that break away and marry out or seek their own. The SETA and the Sri Shanbaga Vinayagar temple try to play the role of a matchmaker even till today.
A very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm really very happy to be here this morning to witness the marriage of Surendran and Shamila. The marriage was initiated by the Social Development Unit, which is the SDU, set up recently, a couple of months ago, by the Ceylon Tamil Association. Surendran came, he saw, he decided Shamila was the one. Shamila came, she saw, she too decided Surendran was the one. Our Ceylonese community is facing a dwindling population problem. Some do not have children, few marriages take place, some wait too long, some choose to remain single. So, SCDA decided to launch its very own SDU late last year to address this issue and to preserve our identity through marriage between members of our Ceylonese community.
But one funny incident that happened was that whilst they knew, suddenly they got to know that I was going for these classes, because once there was a photograph of mine in the papers. And they started saying, well, this girl will never be married. The woman is choice, she spoiled all her chances of marriage. It so happened that my future husband had just come back from the UK, and he was invited by somebody to come for this show. So he came to the show, and that's where he saw me. And then marriage proposal came. And though there was reluctance on my parents' side because I was too young, but anyway, they couldn't withstand the other side, so I got married.
The marriages were brought with the traditional proposals, and arranged marriages was the way. That practice still continues today, even though there are a few that break away and marry out or seek their own. The SCTA and the Sri Shanbaga Vinayagar temple try to play the role of matchmaker even till today. But there was a bleak moment for all in Singapore and Malaya. The World War II was here, and there was a great change.
Then the war started, and we were in the middle of that war with the Japanese occupation in KL. And I saw once on the outskirts of KL, we were staying in a big house with quite a number of Jaffna Tamil families. We were playing, all the boys, out in the field, and suddenly we saw the Japanese troops coming in. On bicycles, they were walking and coming into KL, you see. So we didn't know how dangerous it was, we just sat and watched, and came back and told our parents.
Singapore was Ceylon, and the INA was here to march the Freedom March. Dr. Iswaran recollects his father and family in the war.
He was the doctor in charge of the Indian National Army, very close to Major General Alagappan and Subhash Chandra Bose. We as young boys also had military training so that we would not be held on the street and brought into Singapore.
And Ron Dudley recalls.
Then we decided that, CTA is only up the road. So we could go there. And by this time, the Japanese, I think, had cut off the water supply. And they said that the tap at CTA had a little trickle of water which we could have. So there was some water coming through. But the British soldiers supplied us with waters. You know, they passed along, and all of us had our containers or whatever. They gave us water. Then we went across to CTA. This is where CTA comes in. So we went to the bathroom and all that. Then there was a Chinese man with his little son. I think he must have been the same age as me or maybe younger, 7 or 8 or younger. And he was also waiting for some water. I could understand a little bit of Tamil at that time, you know, because my Tamil education was during the Japanese occupation, and I learned Tamil to read and write. But at that time, my mother spoke to me in Tamil, so I could understand. One man turned down and said, "Ivan Sina nirukran avanga ennathukku inga nikran?" You know? So they kept quiet. Avanga thani ellam kodukka thevilla. You see, I was astounded. As a little boy, I couldn't understand why I didn't want to give this fellow money water. So one of them turned around and told him very clearly, you know, all the others dumped on him. And then they called the little boy and gave him water and everything, and the man, and then sent him off.
And the CTA raised funds for the war.
That was it. We formed the Ladies Orchestra, and we have done quite a bit also. The War Fund, we were the first to appear as a ladies orchestra to raise funds for this War Fund.
The generations of successful men and women were many.
I was fortunate to be one of the early batch of engineers, so that I was fortunate enough to do most of the jobs that was available in Singapore. The most exciting project was building the airport in the sea. That means I had to reclaim land to get the airport built on sea. That is a terminal that you see in Singapore today, the Changi International Airport. Regarding the container port, the first container port was built in Keppel Harbour, and I was fortunate to be the chief engineer of that construction also. When I went to England, I did both structural and civil engineering as well, and the government made me do 1 year with a consultant, and 1 year with a consultant, that consultant did port work. PWD, they never did port, but they asked me to do port work. So I did 1 year of port work and did the lighter berths for Nigeria. When I came back, after 8 years, they wanted a director of port. And that helped me also to achieve my job in the port, because I did port work. I had structures and civil engineering as well. So that helped me to move to the port to organize the engineering division of the port. But then the minister, Mr. Barker, said to continue there, and I didn't come back to the PWD. So I carried on and retired in PSA.
Mr. Thiruchelvam helped develop the army camps. The first was a parade square in Pasilabo camp.
Dr. Go, George Bogart, Kirpa Ramage Jr. at the time. We all went to see what Pasilaba camp. and it was a paddy field. You know, you got long boots, you put one leg in, you pull it out, your leg comes out, the boot gets stuck. No. So, park the car at Thompson Road. That time no car. We get a jeep to take you and walk. Dr. Go walks. Yes, you know. Then I all this walks halfway or three-quarter way. Now, I want the biggest parade square in this part of the world. All must be done within 9 months. So, George Walker looks at me, Claude Eva, that I'm old man, he looks at me, everybody looks at me. Yes, I'll try. No such thing as trying. I want it to be done. No. So, yes, sir. Don't call me sir. I have not been knighted yet. Don't pay. Oh, you're a fierce man. Not fierce man.
The man that made Singapore Airlines fly high.
So I started work actually in the Industrial Development Division, then moved to the Economic Development Board, and from there back to the Ministry of Finance Economic Development Division, and that's where I remained, you know, until was shipped off to defense for a couple of years, back to finance, but in various areas of finance, Economic Planning Unit, Development Division, Monetary Authority of Singapore and GIC, then to the Ministry of National Development, and that's where I ended my career with the government until they decided to post me to London for 3 years to the mission there. Then I was yanked back to Singapore to do this job in the exchanges, the merger and demutualization of the exchanges, which I started in 1999. And the Singapore Exchange itself was incorporated at the end of 1999 and listed in 2000, and I've been here ever since. Too long. Posted to the board of the airline, it was known as Malaysia Singapore Airline, MSA. A couple of years later, there was a split. The Malaysians started MAS and we started Singapore Airlines.
Dr. Ashok Sega recalls regarding his father, Captain Nagi Sega.
He was the first Sri Lankan Tamil to join Malayan Airways at that time, just after he finished his pilot training in Sydney, Australia. So one of the pioneers of Malayan Airways at that time, followed by MSA and then Singapore Airlines. As a pilot, he was responsible for bringing the first Fokker Friendship to Singapore. He later went on to become the first general manager of Singapore Airport Terminal Services, and he's been credited as being the one who started SATS. He later became the first director of in-flight services for Singapore Airlines, a post which he retired from in 1977.
Captain Rohan Harichandra from Singapore Airlines declares,
I think a characteristic of the Ceylon Tamil is we are high achievers. Coupled with being Singaporean, that takes us to a completely different level. It is enhancing, it's reinforcing, and it makes us better people. I think it's a unique combination. You know, we have the best of both worlds. Now, I was very fortunate with that in mind, after having gone through the rigors of training, whether it's instrument flying or whether it's basic theory of flight or eventual examination. At the end of the day, I was very fortunate to have actually topped the year in England, in Oxford, you know, and that is, to me, one of the greatest achievements I have achieved, you know, in my career thus far. When I graduated and came back to Singapore, the Navy still owns part of you, until you finish your reservist liability. And I was also very fortunate that they identified me and they asked me to be aide-de-camp to the then president, President Wee Kim Wee. So that took me on another tour of duty, coincidentally with an appointment of another command of a ship, and this time it was RSS Endurance, a landing ship tank, which I took command of with about another 100 men. Doing my flying training, operating SI aeroplanes, and whilst at the same time serving in the Navy and doing the aide-de-camp appointment. It was very rigorous, but it was also very satisfying, and it's something I was very proud of to have achieved.
Mr. Padma Selvaduri, a senior counsel, was a young politician in the early years.
Student politics with a focus on what's happening in Malaya and Singapore at that time. And I became the secretary of the Malayan Students' Union, and I met up with Dr. Goh Keng Swee, who was doing his PhD at the London School of Economics, and through him got absorbed into PAP politics.
The nephew of Professor S.S. Ratnam speaks of his uncles.
The son of his eldest daughter was late Professor Ratnam, and as you all know, he achieved great heights and put Singapore obstetrics and gynecology on the map. And he was the world president of the Federation of Obstetricians and Gynecologists in 1993. And he had great contribution in our field, and also because of him, Singapore was the third country to introduce the test tube baby program in the world. Late Professor Ratnam also had a big role to help out the transsexual patients of the world by doing the first sex change operation in Singapore in the early 70s. The youngest in the family was Mr. S.T. Ratnam, who at the age of 24 was a deputy secretary of Singapore during the British time, and he continued to be a civil servant. He was the first chairman of the Tourist Promotion Board. He was also involved in building the National Stadium, involved in planning the national flag, the national anthem, and he played a big role in the early stages of Singapore's independence.
Dr. Iswaran, a gynecologist, continues.
We worked in KK. We were delivering over 200 to 400 babies a day, a total of 40 to 44,000 babies a year, inclusive another 25,000 gynecology work. And life was very, very hard, but it was worth the while. It made me a top-class clinician, and I had very good training all around in Sri Lanka as a student, which kept me in good stead.
Dr. Kunaratnam, an ENT surgeon and a teacher and mentor, says,
I came to Singapore in 1959 and joined the service. Soon after I joined the service, I joined the Singapore military forces as a volunteer. Now, I had my training in ear, nose and throat. I went to subsequently I went to UK and came back with the necessary approved postgraduate degrees to practice as a specialist, and I became a senior consultant and head of the department in my specialty, ear, nose and throat. In between, I was also interested in other extra activities among the professional matters, like forming societies like the Singapore Ear, Nose and Throat Society. I was the founder member and held offices from top to bottom.
Dr. Devendran shares his success.
We had our minimum education, and from there I went on, got involved with trade union activities, in fact, it was cooperative activities first, then went on to trade union activities, where I think in the enthusiasm of youth, I got myself in trouble, got out of it, and then joined a MINDEF holding company. I was there for 10 years, and after which I came out to be a lecturer and consultant, seeing that there was no more pathway for me. I then went on 9 months later to buy a company which was failing, but I thought there were a lot of opportunities. Dumped most of my lifelong savings in this company, and turned around this company, which from about 25 staff, there's now grown to 150 staff, with companies in India, Sri Lanka, Australia, and a representative office in London. That's how, in brief, my whole life story started.
And in MDIS, he says,
opportunity comes, you seize it, pushes into greatness, into success stories. One of them is, of course, all of you would have heard it, it's the Management Development Institute of Singapore, which has more than nearly 14,000 students coming from 60 countries. When I went there, it was only about 200 to 300 students with about 5-6 staff. Today it's a well-known institute, and it's going into the region. The fifth attribute to success in anything you do, it is a mysterious force. It could be a divine intervention, it could be parental blessings, without which parents are the instruments of God. And if you do not respect your parents, then you are not going to achieve the success.
Dr. Vijayaratnam ends.
I always believe you always achieve the pinnacle of your potential. That means you must reach, whatever you do, you must reach the best of your own potential, not somebody's potential, your own potential.
Comments from the new echelon.
It's a responsibility of the younger generation, like myself and even my peers. And I'm sure that if we put our hearts and minds into it, we will achieve in the future and contribute to the success of the Ceylon Tamil society in Singapore.
Our generation is about connectivity. It's effectively a gift that we have, being who we are, the minority amongst the minority.
We can learn a lot, I think, from a lot of the Christian organizations that I observe, and even from the Muslim organizations.
Well, the reason why I'm here, it's because of a good 100 years before. Well, here's wishing, all right, that what we do, how we contribute, will result in a better 100 years later. What we believe is it's not where you sit, it's what you do. So with that, all the best.
I aspire to become a doctor. Maybe I may be a doctor or a teacher.
I would like to follow in my grandfather's footsteps, as he was a great man.
Singapore has managed to keep the rich diversity of race, religion and heritage it cradles. In its arms is a peaceful nation of citizens. The Ceylon Tamil that came here in the yesteryears is fiercely patriotic to the country they adopted. Let's hear Ganesan Sabapathy recall.
When in primary school, I sang the God Save the King. When the king passed away, I had to learn to sing God Save the Queen. And during the Japanese time, I had to sing the Japanese national Kimi Gayo. And when Singapore merged with Malaysia, I had to sing the Negara Ku. And when Singapore became independent, I had to sing the national anthem. What is our national anthem, please? Majulah Singapura. Yeah, because I was a past school, I had already gone.
They have integrated into the diversified diaspora of this nation today, where no matter what race they are, they call themselves Singaporean with pride. And if we were to write on each and every one, it would take volumes and volumes. The contribution of everyone here in Singapore is significant. The records of generations gone by are documented here in these first 100 years of the association. These are some of the men and women of substance to be remembered for their contributions. These personalities took a prided position in making a mark to put our tiny nation, Singapore, on the world map. They were the Singapore Ceylon Tamils.